Right now, at this very second, deep in the Persian Gulf and stretching across the global oceans, a multi-billion-dollar war is being fought. There are no declarations of war on CNN. The president hasn't addressed the nation from the Oval Office to announce it. Most Americans are busy arguing over domestic elections and political scandals, completely blind to the fact that the United States military and intelligence agencies are currently executing one of the most aggressive, high-stakes blockades in modern history. But here's the terrifying part. It's a war that Washington is desperately trying to hide, and it's a war we might actually be losing. Most people think a blockade means giant gray battleships lined up in the water, pointing massive guns at enemy ports. That is the old way of fighting. The new way is entirely invisible to the naked eye. It happens in the shadows of global finance, through satellite tracking, spoofed signals, and a deadly game of cat and mouse on the high seas. The target is Iran, and the goal is simple: completely choke off their economy until the regime collapses from the inside. But that was only the beginning. To understand the sheer scale of what is happening, we have to look at a ship that doesn't officially exist. Imagine a massive oil tanker, longer than 3 football fields, sitting low in the dark waters of the Gulf of Oman. According to every global tracking system, this ship is currently docked in a completely different country. Its digital signature says it's in the Caribbean, but in reality, it is sitting off the coast of Iran, taking on millions of barrels of sanctioned crude oil under the cover of darkness. This is the Phantom Fleet, a hidden armada of hundreds of ghost ships that Iran uses to smuggle its oil past the United States Navy and Western sanctions. These ships paint over their names, they forge their registration documents, and they physically turn off their transponders, a maneuver known as going dark. When you look at a satellite map of global shipping lanes, everything looks normal. But zooming in on classified military imaging reveals a completely different reality. There is a massive, coordinated shadow economy floating right under our noses. And this is where the political chess game gets incredibly dangerous. Washington knows about the Phantom Fleet. The CIA tracks them. The Pentagon watches them. But stopping them is a completely different story. You see, the United States is playing a very delicate game of global Jenga. If they aggressively board and seize every single Iranian ghost ship, Iran will retaliate. And we already know exactly what that retaliation looks like. Let's rewind for a second to the Red Sea. For months, the Houthi rebels in Yemen have been launching anti-ship missiles and explosive drones at commercial cargo vessels. The mainstream news tells you this is just a rogue rebel group acting out of solidarity with geopolitical events in the Middle East. That is a comforting lie. The Houthis do not manufacture highly advanced ballistic anti-ship missiles in mountain caves. Those weapons, the targeting intelligence, and the satellite data are handed to them directly by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The chaos in the Red Sea is not a random uprising. It is Iran's direct counter-blockade. Tehran is sending a very clear, very violent message to Washington. If you try to choke off our shipping in the Persian Gulf, we will completely shut down global trade in the Red Sea. And it worked. The United States sent aircraft carriers, destroyers, and coalition fleets to protect the shipping lanes. But you cannot fight a multi-million-dollar missile with a billion-dollar warship forever without bleeding money. It is an economic war of attrition, and Iran is using proxies so they can maintain plausible deniability. It is a masterpiece of asymmetrical warfare. Now imagine you are sitting inside the White House Situation Room. You have a massive problem. You want to bankrupt Iran to stop them from funding these exact proxy groups, not to mention their nuclear program. But you are also in the middle of a massive American election cycle. Here's the political hypocrisy nobody is talking about. The current administration cannot afford a massive spike in global gas prices. If the U.S. military fully enforces the blockade and completely wipes out Iranian oil exports, global oil markets would panic. Gas prices in America would explode overnight. And in American politics, high gas prices at the pump mean you lose the election. Period. So, Washington is trapped in a paralyzing contradiction. They have to look tough on Iran for the cameras, dropping sanctions and issuing stern warnings. But behind closed doors, they have to quietly allow a certain amount of Iranian oil to slip through the cracks, just to keep the global markets stable. It is a secret blockade that is deliberately designed to leak. But the real reason this strategy is failing is much darker, and we'll come back to that in a minute. First, you have to understand who is waiting on the other side of this shadow trade. Because Washington thought they had Iran cornered, but Tehran had a trump card, and it was sitting thousands of miles away. Now pay attention to what happens next, because this is where the entire American strategy starts collapsing. Iran doesn't just need to sneak oil out. They need someone willing to buy it despite the terrifying threat of the U.S. Treasury Department. Enter China. Beijing doesn't care about American sanctions, but they also don't want to risk their massive state-owned oil companies getting banned from the U.S. financial system. So, they created a brilliant, completely legally insulated loophole. China buys the smuggled Iranian oil using independent, privately owned refineries known as teapots. These small refineries have zero exposure to the U.S. financial system. They don't do business in dollars. They don't care about American banks. They buy the sanctioned Iranian crude at a massive discount, process it into gasoline, and sell it domestically inside China. Iran gets billions in cash to fund their proxy wars and nuclear ambitions. China gets cheap energy to fuel its manufacturing empire. And the United States is left standing in the cold, holding a piece of paper with sanctions written on it that nobody respects. This is the moment American officials realized they had a serious problem. The blockade is actually backfiring. Instead of isolating Iran, the American financial pressure has physically forced Iran, China, and even Russia into a new ironclad economic alliance. An alliance explicitly designed to destroy the power of the U.S. dollar. If you want to understand the real power games shaping the world without the boring mainstream news filters, make sure to subscribe. Now, let's get back into the shadows, because this financial war is quickly spiraling into a terrifying military reality. The U.S. military is stretched thin. They are sending munitions to Ukraine, positioning assets around Taiwan, and now playing endless whack-a-mole with Iranian proxies in the Middle East. Iran knows this. They are bleeding the American empire by 1,000 tiny cuts. They don't want a direct war with the United States. They want a prolonged, exhausting, expensive standoff that eventually forces America to pack up and leave the Middle East entirely. And this next move changed everything. While the world was distracted by the blockade, the ghost fleets, and the missiles in the Red Sea, Iran was quietly spinning its centrifuges. Intelligence agencies are now whispering that Iran is mere weeks away from having enough highly enriched uranium to construct a nuclear weapon. The blockade was supposed to stop this. Instead, it accelerated it. The regime in Tehran looked at the world, looked at the U.S. election paralysis, and realized that this is their moment. The window of opportunity is wide open. If they cross the nuclear threshold, the entire geopolitical map of the world changes overnight. The secret blockade is no longer just about oil. It is a desperate race against a ticking biological and nuclear clock. Washington is running out of options, and they are running out of time. They cannot sanction what they cannot control, and they cannot bomb what would trigger World War III. The shadow war is escalating, and the illusion of peace is starting to shatter. And if that happens, the world may be entering a completely different era. Because the next global conflict may not begin with bombs, but with one political decision in a war nobody even knew we were fighting. And the frightening part is, this may already be happening.